Ferdinand the Faithful and Ferdinand the Unfaithful. Once upon a time, there was a man and a woman who had no children as long as they were rich, but when they became poor, they had a little boy. They could not find a godfather for him, so the man said he would go to another place to see if he could find one there. As he was on his way, he met a poor man who asked him where he was going. He said he was going to see if he could get a godfather, as he was poor, and no one wanted to be a godfather for him. "Oh," said the poor man, "you are poor and I am poor. I will be the godfather for you. However, I am so poor that I can give the child nothing. Go home and tell the nurse to come to the church with the child." When they all arrived at the church together, the beggar was already there, and he gave the child the name Ferdinand the Faithful. As they were leaving the church, the beggar said, "Now go home. I can give you nothing, and you should give me nothing either." However, he gave the nurse a key and told her to give it to the father when she got home. The father was to keep it until the child was 14 years old, and then he was to go to the heath, where there was a castle, which the key would fit. Everything inside would belong to him. When the child was 7 years old and had grown strong, he went to play with other boys, and each of them boasted about what they had received from their godfather. But the child could say nothing and was vexed. He went home and said to his father, "Did I get nothing at all from my godfather?" "Oh, yes," said the father, "you received a key. If there is a castle on the heath, go there and open it." So he went there, but there was no castle to be seen or heard of. 7 years later, when he was 14 years old, he went there again, and there stood the castle. When he opened it, there was nothing inside but a horse, a white one. The boy was so full of joy because he had a horse that he mounted it and galloped back to his father. "Now I have a white horse, and I will travel," he said. So he set out, and as he was on his way, a pen was lying on the road. At first he thought he would pick it up, but then he thought to himself, "You should leave it lying there. You will easily find a pen where you are going if you need one." As he was thus riding away, a voice called after him, "Ferdinand the Faithful, take it with you." He looked around but saw no one, so he went back and picked it up. When he had ridden a little way farther, he passed by a lake, and a fish was lying on the bank, gasping for breath. He said, "Wait, my dear fish. I will help you get into the water." And he took hold of it by the tail and threw it into the lake. Then the fish put its head out of the water and said, "Since you have helped me out of the mud, I will give you a flute. When you are in need, play on it, and I will help you. If you ever drop something into the water, just play, and I will retrieve it for you." Then he rode away, and a man came up to him and asked him where he was going. "Oh, to the next place." Then he asked his name. "Ferdinand the Faithful." "See, we almost have the same name. I am called Ferdinand the Unfaithful." And they both set out for the inn in the nearest place. Now it was terrible that Ferdinand the Unfaithful knew everything that others thought and wanted to do. He knew this through all kinds of cunning tricks. There was a fine girl at the inn who had a clear face and carried herself so prettily. She fell in love with Ferdinand the Faithful, for he was a handsome man, and she asked him where he was going. He replied that he wanted to travel around. Then she said he should stay, as there was a king in the country who gladly needed a servant or a forerunner. He should enter his service. He answered that he did not want to just go to someone and offer himself. Then the girl said, "Oh, I will take care of that." So she immediately went to the king and told him she knew a handsome servant. The king was very pleased and had him brought to him and wanted to make him a servant. However, he preferred to be a forerunner, as he had to be where his horse was. So the king made him a forerunner. When Ferdinand the Unfaithful realized this, he said to the girl, "Well, you help him and not me." "Oh," said the girl, "I will help you too." She thought to herself, "You must keep him as a friend, for he is not to be trusted." She went to stand before the king and recommended him as a servant. The king was pleased. Every morning when he appeared before the Lord, the king lamented, "Oh, if only I had my beloved with me." Ferdinand the Unfaithful was always jealous of Ferdinand the Faithful, and when the king lamented like this, he said, "You have the forerunner, send him to fetch her, and if he does not, his head shall be laid at your feet." So the king summoned Ferdinand the Faithful and told him he had a beloved in a certain place, and he must fetch her. If he did not do so, he would die. Ferdinand the Faithful went to the stable to his white horse and lamented and cried, "Oh, what an unfortunate child of man I am!" Then someone called behind him, "Ferdinand the Faithful, why are you crying?" He looked around but saw no one and kept lamenting, "Oh, my dear white horse, now I must leave you. Now I must die." Then the voice called again, "Ferdinand the Faithful, why are you crying?" He finally realized it was his white horse speaking. "Is that you, my white horse? Can you speak?" The horse replied, "I'm supposed to go to this place and fetch the bride. Don't you know how I should begin?" The white horse answered, "Go to the king and say that if he gives you what you need, you will fetch her. If he gives you a ship full of meat and a ship full of bread, it will succeed, for there are great giants on the water. And if you don't bring them meat, they will tear you apart. And there are great birds, and if you don't have bread for them, they will peck your eyes out." Then the king had all the butchers in the land slaughter, and all the bakers bake until the ships were full. When they were full, the white horse said to Ferdinand the Faithful, "Now sit on me and pull me into the ship. When the giants come, say, 'Quiet, quiet, my dear little giants. I have thought of you. I have brought you something.' And when the birds come, say again, 'Quiet, quiet, my dear little birds. I have thought of you. I have brought you something.' Then they will do nothing. And when you come to the castle, the giants will help you. Then go to the castle and take a pair of giants with you. There the princess lies asleep. You must not wake her, but the giants must pick her up with the bed and carry her into the ship." And everything happened as the little white horse had said. Ferdinand the Faithful gave the giants and the birds what he had brought for them. And in return, the giants willingly carried the princess in her bed to the king. When they arrived at the king's place, the princess said she could not live without her writings, which had been left in her castle. Ferdinand the Faithful was again sent off at the instigation of Ferdinand the Unfaithful, and the king commanded him to fetch the writings from the castle, or else he would die. He went back to the stable, cried, and said, "Oh, my dear little white horse, now I have to go away again. How shall we manage this?" The little white horse said they should load the ship full again. Everything happened as before. The giants and the birds were satisfied and appeased by the meat. When they arrived at the castle, the little white horse told him to go inside, into the princess's bedroom, and the writings were on the desk. Ferdinand the Faithful went and fetched them. While they were on the water, he let his feather fall into the water. The little white horse said, "Now I can't help you." Then he remembered the flute. He started to play, and the fish came with the feather in its mouth and handed it to him. Now he brought the writings to the castle, where the wedding was held. The queen did not like the king because he had no nose, but she liked Ferdinand the Faithful very much. Once, when all the lords from the court were gathered together, the queen said she could perform a trick. She could chop off someone's head and put it back on again, and someone should try it. No one wanted to be the first, so Ferdinand the Faithful had to do it, again at the instigation of Ferdinand the Unfaithful. They chopped off his head and put it back on, and it healed perfectly, except for a red thread around his neck. Then the king asked her, "My dear, where did you learn that?" "Well," she said, "I understand the art. Shall I try it on you?" "Oh, yes," he said. So she chopped off his head, but did not put it back on, pretending she could not get it back on properly. The king was buried, and she married Ferdinand the Faithful. He always rode his little white horse, and once, while he was riding, he told it to take him to another heath he knew and to gallop around 3 times. When he did this, the little white horse stood on its hind legs and transformed into a prince. The Iron Stove. Once upon a time, when wishing still had some effect, a king's son was bewitched by an old witch and confined to sit inside a large iron stove in a forest. He spent many years there, and no one could free him. One day, a princess who had lost her way in the forest and could not find her father's kingdom came upon the iron stove after wandering for 9 days. She stood in front of the iron box, and a voice from within asked her, "Where do you come from, and where are you going?" She answered, "I have lost my father's kingdom and cannot find my way home." The voice from the iron stove said, I will help you get home in a short time, if you promise to do what I ask. I am a greater king's son than you are a king's daughter, and I wish to marry you." She was frightened and thought, "Dear God, what can I do with an iron stove?" However, because she wished to return to her father, she promised to do what was asked of her. But the voice said, "You must come back and bring a knife to scrape a hole in the iron." Then the voice gave her a companion who walked beside her silently and brought her home in 2 hours. Great joy filled the castle when the princess returned, and the old king hugged and kissed her. She was, however, very troubled and said, "Dear father, what a journey I have had! I would not have made it home from the great wild forest if I had not come upon an iron stove, and I had to promise to return, free it, and marry it." The old king was so terrified that he nearly fainted, for he had only this one daughter. They decided to send a miller's daughter, who was very beautiful, in her place. They took her out, gave her a knife, and told her to scrape at the iron stove. She scraped for 24 hours, but could not remove even the smallest piece of iron. When dawn broke, a voice from the stove called, "It seems to me it is day outside." She answered, "It seems so to me too. I think I hear my father's mill rattling." "So you are a miller's daughter. Go away immediately and send the princess here." She went back and told the old king that the one outside wanted his daughter and no one else. The king was frightened, and the princess wept. They still had a swineherd's daughter, who was even more beautiful than the miller's daughter, and they decided to give her a piece of money to go to the iron stove instead of the princess. She too was taken there and had to scrape for 24 hours, but achieved nothing. When dawn broke, a voice from the stove called, "It seems to me it is day outside." She answered, "It seems so to me too. I think I hear my father's little horn blowing." "So you are a swineherd's daughter. Go away immediately and send the princess here. Tell her she must do what I have asked, or the entire kingdom will collapse, and not a single stone will remain standing." When the princess heard this, she began to weep, but there was no other choice. She had to keep her promise. She bade her father farewell, took a knife, and went into the forest to the iron stove. When she arrived, she began to scrape, and the iron gave way. After 2 hours, she had scraped a small hole. She looked inside and saw a handsome young man, shining with gold and precious jewels, who delighted her very soul. Now she scraped further until the hole was big enough for him to come out. He said, "You are mine, and I am yours. You are my bride and have freed me." He wanted to take her to his kingdom, but she asked to return to her father first. The prince agreed, but told her she should not speak more than 3 words to her father before returning. So she went home, but spoke more than 3 words. Immediately, the iron stove vanished and was moved far away over glass mountains and cutting swords. The prince, however, was freed and no longer confined. She then took leave of her father, took a small amount of money, and went back into the great forest to search for the iron stove, but it was nowhere to be found. She searched for 9 days, and her hunger grew so great that she did not know what to do, as she had nothing left to eat. When evening came, she sat on a small tree, planning to spend the night there out of fear of wild animals. As midnight approached, she saw a small light in the distance and thought, "Oh, perhaps I will be saved there." She climbed down from the tree and followed the light, praying along the way. She arrived at a small old house surrounded by grass and with a small pile of wood in front. She thought, "Oh, what have I come upon here?" She looked inside through a window and saw nothing but thick and small toads, but a table set with wine, roast meat, and silver plates and cups. She gathered her courage and knocked on the door. Immediately, the fat toad called out, "Young maiden green and small, Hutzelbein, Hutzelbein's dog, Hutzel here and there, quickly see who is outside." A small toad came and opened the door. As she entered, all welcomed her and asked her to sit. They asked, "Where do you come from, and where are you going?" She told them everything, how she had broken the command to speak no more than 3 words, and how the stove and the prince had vanished. Now she intended to search and wander over mountains and valleys until she found him. The old fat toad then said, "Young maiden green and small, Hutzelbein, Hutzelbein's dog, Hutzel here and there, bring me the large box." The small toad went and brought the box. They gave her food and drink, and showed her to a beautiful bed made of silk and velvet, where she lay down and slept in God's name. When day came, she got up, and the old toad gave her 3 needles from the large box. She was told she would need them, for she would have to cross a high glass mountain, 3 cutting swords, and a large body of water. If she succeeded, she would reclaim her beloved. The toad also gave her 3 items to take care of: 3 large needles, a plow wheel, and 3 nuts. With these, she set out. When she reached the glass mountain, which was very slippery, she placed the needles behind her feet and then moved forward, crossing it. Once over, she placed the needles carefully where she could find them again. Next, she came to the 3 cutting swords, placed the plow wheel on the ground, and rolled over them. Finally, she came to a large body of water and crossed it to a grand and beautiful castle. She entered and asked for a job, saying she was a poor maid and willing to work. She knew the prince, whom she had freed from the iron stove in the great forest, was inside. She was hired as a kitchen maid for a small wage. Now the prince had another woman by his side, whom he intended to marry, as he believed the first princess had long since died. In the evening, after she had finished her washing and was done with her tasks, she felt in her pocket and found the 3 nuts given to her by the old toad. She bit into one, and to her surprise, found a magnificent royal dress inside. When the bride saw this, she wanted to buy the dress, saying, "This is not a dress for a servant girl." The girl replied that she would not sell it, but if the bride allowed her to sleep one night in the chamber of her betrothed, she could have the dress. The bride agreed, as she had never seen such a beautiful dress before. That evening, she told her betrothed, "The silly girl wants to sleep in your chamber." "If you are agreeable, so am I," he replied. However, the bride gave him a glass of wine with a sleeping potion in it. Thus they went to bed, and he slept so soundly that the girl could not wake him. She cried the entire night, calling out, "I freed you from the wild forest and the iron stove. I searched for you and crossed a glass mountain, 3 cutting swords, and a large body of water before I found you, and yet you will not hear me." The servants, sitting outside the room, heard her weeping and told their master in the morning. The next evening, after finishing her tasks, she bit into the second nut, finding an even more beautiful dress inside. When the bride saw it, she again wanted to buy it. But the girl only asked for another night in the chamber of the bridegroom. Once again, the bride gave him a sleeping potion, and he slept so deeply that he heard nothing. The kitchen maid wept through the night, crying out, "I freed you from a forest and an iron stove. I searched for you and crossed a glass mountain, 3 cutting swords, and a large body of water before I found you, and yet you will not hear me." The servants, sitting outside, heard her weeping and informed their master in the morning. On the 3rd evening, after finishing her tasks, she bit into the 3rd nut and found the most beautiful dress of all, glittering with pure gold. When the bride saw it, she wanted it immediately. The girl agreed to give it only if she could sleep in the bridegroom's chamber for a 3rd time. This time, the prince was cautious and let the sleeping potion slip away. As she began to weep and cry out, "Beloved, I freed you from the cruel wild forest and an iron stove," the prince woke up and said, "You are the true one. You are mine, and I am yours." That night, he set off with her in a carriage. They took the dresses from the false bride so she could not rise. When they reached the large body of water, they sailed across it. When they came to the 3 cutting swords, they used the plow wheel to cross, and at the glass mountain, they used the 3 needles. Finally, they arrived at the small old house, but when they entered, it turned into a grand castle. The toads were all freed and revealed to be children of kings, filled with joy. A wedding was held, and they stayed in the castle, which was much larger than her father's. Since her father lamented being alone, they fetched him, and they had 2 kingdoms and lived in a happy marriage. Then a mouse came. The tale was done. The Lazy Spinner. In a village, there lived a man and his wife, and the wife was so lazy that she never wanted to work at anything. Whatever her husband gave her to spin, she didn't finish, and whatever she did spin, she didn't wind, but let it all lie tangled in a heap. When the man scolded her, she was quick with her tongue and said, "Well, how should I wind it when I have no reel? You go into the forest and get me one." "If that's all," said the man, "then I'll go into the forest and get some wood for making reels." The woman feared that if he got the wood, he would make her a reel, and she would have to wind her yarn and then start spinning again. She thought for a bit, then a good idea came to her, and she secretly followed the man into the forest. When he had climbed a tree to choose and cut the wood, she crept into the thicket below where he couldn't see her and called up, "Who cuts wood for reels shall die, and who winds shall perish." The man listened, laid down the axe for a moment, and wondered what that could mean. "Well, what was that?" he finally said. "It must have been ringing in your ears. Don't make yourself needlessly afraid." So he grabbed the axe again and was about to cut when it called up again from below, "Who cuts wood for reels shall die, and who wins shall perish." He stopped, got scared and anxious, and pondered the matter. But after a while his courage returned, and he reached for the axe a third time and wanted to cut. But for the third time it called out loudly, "Who cuts wood for reels shall die, and who wins shall perish." That was enough for him, and all his desire was gone. He quickly climbed down the tree and started on his way home. The woman ran as fast as she could by side paths so she would get home first. When he entered the room, she pretended as if nothing had happened and said, "Well, did you bring good wood for a reel?" "No," he said. "I see well enough that winding won't do," and told her what had happened to him in the forest, and from then on left her in peace about it. Soon after, the man began to complain again about the disorder in the house. "Wife," he said, "it is really a shame that the spun yarn should lie there all tangled up." "I'll tell you what," she said, "since we still don't have a reel, you stand in the loft and I'll stand below and I'll throw the yarn up to you, and you throw it down to me so we'll get a skein after all." "Yes, that will do," said the man. So they did that, and when it was done, he said, "The yarn is in skeins, now it must be boiled." The woman was distressed again. She certainly said, "Yes, we'll boil it first thing in the morning," but she was secretly planning another trick. Early in the morning, she got up, lit a fire, and put the kettle on, only instead of the yarn, she put in a lump of tow and let it boil. Then she went to the man who was still lying in bed and said to him, "I must go out. You must get up and look after the yarn in the kettle on the fire. But you must do it promptly. Pay attention, because if the cock crows and you haven't checked it, the yarn will turn into tow." The man was willing and took care not to delay. He got up as quickly as he could and went into the kitchen. But when he reached the kettle and peeped in, he saw to his horror nothing but a lump of tow. Then the poor man was as quiet as a mouse, thinking he had neglected it and was to blame, and in the future said no more about yarn and spinning. But you must admit she was an odious woman. The Four Skillful Brothers. There was once a poor man who had 4 sons. When they had grown up, he said to them, "My dear children, you must now go out into the world, for I have nothing to give you. Set out and go into foreign lands, learn a trade, and see how you can make your way." So the 4 brothers took their walking sticks, bade their father farewell, and left together through the gate. After they had traveled for a while, they came to a crossroads that led in 4 different directions. The eldest said, "Here we must part ways, but let us meet again at this spot in 4 years' time, and in the meantime, let us seek our fortunes." Each brother then went his own way. The eldest met a man who asked him where he was going and what he intended to do. "I want to learn a trade," he replied. The man said, "Come with me and become a thief." "No," he answered, "that is no longer considered an honest trade, and it usually ends with one swinging on the gallows." "Oh," said the man, "you need not fear the gallows. I will only teach you how to get things that no one else can obtain, and no one will ever catch you." So he allowed himself to be persuaded, and became such a skillful thief that nothing was safe from him once he desired to have it. The second brother met a man who asked him the same question about what he wanted to learn in the world. "I don't know yet," he replied. "Then come with me and become an astronomer. There's nothing better than that, for nothing will remain hidden from you." He liked the idea and became such a skillful astronomer that when he had learned everything and was about to travel onwards, his master gave him a telescope and said, "With this, you can see whatever happens on earth and in the heavens, and nothing will remain hidden from you." A hunter took the third brother into training and taught him everything related to hunting so well that he became an accomplished hunter. When he left, his master gave him a gun and said, "This gun will never fail you. Whatever you aim at, you will surely hit." The youngest brother also met a man who spoke to him and inquired about his intentions. "Would you not like to be a tailor?" he asked. "Not that I know of," replied the youth. Sitting hunched over from morning till night, driving the needle back and forth and wielding the iron, is not to my taste. "Oh, you speak out of ignorance," answered the man. "With me, you will learn a very different kind of tailoring, which is respectable and proper, and for the most part, very honorable." So he allowed himself to be persuaded and went with the man, learning his craft from the ground up. When they parted, the man gave the youth a needle and said, "With this, you can sew together whatever is given to you. Whether it is as soft as an egg or as hard as steel, it will all become one piece and no seam will be visible." When the appointed 4 years had passed, the four brothers arrived at the crossroads at the same time, embraced and kissed each other, and returned home to their father. "Well," said the father, quite pleased, "the wind has blown you back to me again?" They told him all that had happened to them and that each had learned his trade. Now they were sitting in front of the house under a large tree when the father said, "Now I will put you to the test and see what you can do." Then he looked up and said to the second son, "Up in the top of this tree, between two branches, there is a chaffinch's nest. Tell me how many eggs are in it." The astronomer took his glass, looked up, and said, "There are 5." The father then said to the eldest, "Fetch the eggs down without disturbing the bird that is sitting and brooding on them." The skillful thief climbed up and took the 5 eggs from beneath the bird, which did not notice and remained quietly sitting where it was. He brought them down to his father. The father took them, placed 1 egg at each corner of the table and the 5th in the middle, and said to the huntsman, "Shoot the 5 eggs in the middle in 2 with 1 shot." The huntsman aimed his gun and shot the eggs, all 5 as his father had desired, and that with 1 shot. He certainly must have had some of the powder that shoots around corners. "Now it's your turn," said the father to the 4th son. "You shall sew the eggs together again, and the young birds inside them as well, so that they are not harmed by the shot." The tailor brought his needle and sewed them together as his father had demanded. When he had done this, the thief had to climb up the tree again, carry them to the nest, and put them back under the bird without it noticing anything. The little bird continued to brood them until they hatched, and a few days later the young ones crept out and had a red ring around their necks where they had been sewn together by the tailor. "Well," said the old man to his sons, "I must praise you highly. You have used your time well and learned something of value. I cannot say which of you deserves the most praise. It will be shown if you soon have an opportunity to use your skills." Not long after, there was a great uproar in the land because the king's daughter had been carried off by a dragon. The king was troubled day and night and announced that whoever brought her back would have her as his wife. The 4 brothers said to each other, "This would be a good opportunity for us to show what we can do," and resolved to go forth together to rescue the king's daughter. "I will soon know where she is," said the astronomer, looked through his telescope, and said, "I see her already. She is far from here, sitting on a rock in the sea, and the dragon is beside her, watching her." Then he went to the king and asked for a ship for himself and his brothers, and sailed with them over the sea until they came to the rock. There the king's daughter was sitting, and the dragon was lying asleep on her lap. The huntsman said, "I dare not shoot. I would kill the beautiful maiden at the same time." "Then I will try my skill," said the thief, and he crept up and stole her away from under the dragon so quietly and dexterously that the monster noticed nothing but went on snoring. They hurried joyfully onto the ship with her and steered out into the open sea. However, the dragon, upon awakening and not finding the king's daughter, flew after them, snorting furiously through the air. Just as he was hovering over the ship and about to swoop down, the hunter aimed his gun and shot him straight through the heart. The monster fell dead, but it was so large and heavy that it shattered the entire ship as it fell. They managed to grab hold of a few planks and floated on the wide sea. They were in great distress again, but the tailor, not idle, took his wonderful needle, stitched the planks together with a few big stitches, and sat on them, gathering all the pieces of the ship. Then he sewed them together so skillfully that in a short time the ship was seaworthy again, and they could sail home safely. When the king saw his daughter again, there was great joy. He said to the four brothers, "One of you shall have her as a wife, but you must decide among yourselves who it will be." A fierce argument arose among them because each one claimed her. The astronomer said, "If I hadn't seen the king's daughter, all your skills would have been useless. Therefore, she is mine." The thief said, "What good would seeing her have done if I hadn't taken her from under the dragon? Therefore, she is mine." The hunter said, "You and the king's daughter would have been torn apart by the monster if my bullet hadn't hit it. Therefore, she is mine." The tailor said, "And if I hadn't stitched the ship back together with my skill, you would all have drowned miserably. Therefore, she is mine." The king then made a ruling. "Each of you has an equal right, and since none of you can have the maiden, none of you shall have her, but I will give each of you half a kingdom as a reward." The brothers agreed with this decision, saying, "It is better this way than for us to be at odds." Thus, each received half a kingdom, and they lived with their father in complete happiness as long as God willed. And 2 eyes, 1 eye, and 3 eyes. There was once a woman who had 3 daughters. The eldest was called One Eye because she had only 1 eye in the middle of her forehead. The second was called Two Eyes because she had 2 eyes like other people. And the youngest was called Three Eyes because she had 3 eyes, with the third eye also in the center of her forehead. But because Two Eyes did not look any different from other children, her sisters and mother could not stand her. They said to her, "You, with your 2 eyes, are no better than the common folk. You do not belong with us." They pushed her around, threw old clothes at her, gave her hardly anything to eat except scraps, and did everything they could to make her unhappy. One day, Two Eyes had to go out into the fields to tend the goat. But she was still very hungry because her sisters had given her so little to eat. So she sat down on a ridge and began to weep bitterly. And as she wept, 2 streams flowed from her eyes. And when in her sorrow she looked up once, a woman stood beside her who asked, "Two Eyes, why are you crying?" Two Eyes replied, "Shouldn't I cry? Because I have 2 eyes like other people. My sisters and my mother cannot stand me. They push me from one corner to another, throw old clothes at me, and give me nothing to eat except what they leave behind. Today, they gave me so little that I am still very hungry." The wise woman said, "Two Eyes, dry your face. I will tell you something so that you shall never hunger again. Just say to your goat, 'Kid, bleat, table set.' Then a neatly laid table will appear before you with the most delicious food on it, so that you can eat as much as you want. And when you are satisfied and no longer need the table, just say, 'Kid, bleat, table, away,' and it will disappear before your eyes." Then the wise woman departed. But Two Eyes thought, "I must try immediately to see if what she said is true, because I am too hungry." And she said, "Kid, bleat, table, set." And hardly had she spoken the words when there stood a little table covered with a white cloth, on it a plate with knife and fork and a silver spoon, surrounded by the most delicious dishes, steaming and still warm as if just from the kitchen. Then Two Eyes said the shortest prayer she knew, "Lord God, be our guest at all times. Amen," helped herself, and enjoyed the food. And when she was satisfied, she said, as the wise woman had taught her, "Kid, bleat, table, away." And immediately the little table and everything on it disappeared. "This is a fine way to keep house," thought Two Eyes, and was quite pleased and in good spirits. In the evening, when she came home with her goat, she found an earthenware bowl of food her sisters had left for her, but she did not touch it. The next day, she went out again with her goat and left the few crumbs she was given untouched. The first and second times, her sisters paid no attention, but when it happened each time, they took notice and said, "Something's not right with Two Eyes. She leaves her food every time, but used to eat everything given to her. She must have found other ways." When Two Eyes set out again, One Eye approached and said, "I will come with you into the field and make sure the goat is properly tended and fed." But Two Eyes understood what One Eye had in mind and drove the goat into tall grass, saying, "Come, One Eye, Let's sit down. I will sing to you. One Eye sat down, and tired from the unusual path and the heat of the sun, closed its one eye and fell asleep. Seeing that One Eye was sound asleep and could not reveal anything, Two Eyes said, Kid, bleat, table, set, and sat down at its little table, eating and drinking until satisfied. Then it called again, Kid, bleat, table, away, and everything disappeared instantly. Two Eyes woke One Eye and said, One Eye, you wanted to watch and fell asleep. The goat could have run off everywhere. Come, let's go home. So they went home, and Two Eyes left its bowl untouched again, and One Eye could not explain to the mother why it did not want to eat, and said in excuse, I fell asleep outside. The next day, the mother said to Three Eyes, This time you shall go and watch if Two Eyes eats outside, and if someone brings food and drink to it, because it must be eating and drinking in secret. So Three Eyes approached Two Eyes and said, I will go along and see if the goat is properly tended and fed. But Two Eyes understood what Three Eyes had in mind and drove the goat into tall grass, saying, Let's sit down here, Three Eyes. I will sing to you. Three Eyes sat down, tired from the journey and the heat of the sun, and Two Eyes began the previous little song again, singing, Three Eyes, are you awake? But instead of singing, Three Eyes, are you asleep? Out of carelessness, it sang, Two Eyes, are you asleep? And continued, Three Eyes, are you awake? Two Eyes, are you asleep? With that, Three Eyes closed its two eyes and fell asleep, but its third eye, not being addressed by the rhyme, did not sleep. It pretended to sleep cunningly, even blinking, and could see everything very well. And when Two Eyes thought Three Eyes was fast asleep, it said its rhyme, Kid, bleat, table, set, ate and drank to its heart's content, and then bid the table farewell, Kid, bleat, table, away. Three Eyes had seen everything. Then Two Eyes went to it, woke it up, and said, Oh, Three Eyes, did you fall asleep? You can watch well. Come, let's go home. And when they arrived home, Two Eyes again did not eat, and Three Eyes said to the mother, Now I know why that haughty creature does not eat. When she speaks to the goat outside, Kid, bleat, table, set, a little table appears before her, set with the best food, much better than what we have here. And when she's full, she says, Kid, bleat, table, away, and everything disappears again. I saw it all exactly. She had lulled me to sleep with her rhyme, but luckily, the one eye on her forehead stayed awake. Then the jealous mother exclaimed, Do you want to have it better than us? Your pleasure shall be short-lived. She fetched a butcher's knife and struck the goat in the heart so that it fell dead. When Two Eyes saw this, it went out full of sorrow, sat down on the edge of the field, and wept bitter tears. Suddenly, the wise woman appeared beside it again and asked, Two Eyes, why are you weeping? Shouldn't I weep? It answered. The goat that used to set such a beautiful table for me every day when I recited your rhyme has been stabbed to death by my mother. Now I must suffer hunger and sorrow again. The wise woman said, Two Eyes, I will give you good advice. Ask your sisters to give you the entrails of the slaughtered goat and bury them in the earth in front of the doorstep, and it will bring you good fortune. Then she disappeared, and Two Eyes went home and said to the sisters, Dear sisters, please give me some of my goat. I don't ask for anything good. Just give me the entrails. They laughed and said, You can have it if that's all you want. And Two Eyes took the entrails and quietly buried them in the ground in front of the doorstep that evening. The next morning, when they all woke up and went out to the doorstep, there stood a wonderful, magnificent tree. It had leaves of silver and fruits of gold hanging among them, so that there was surely nothing more beautiful and precious in the wide world. They did not know how the tree had come there overnight, but Two Eyes noticed that it had grown from the entrails of the goat because it stood right where it had buried them. Then the mother said to One Eye, Climb up, my child, and pick some fruits from the tree. One Eye climbed up, but whenever it tried to grab one of the golden apples, the branch moved out of its hands, and this happened every time, so it couldn't break a single apple, no matter how hard it tried. Then the mother said, Three Eyes, you climb up. You can look around better with your three eyes than One Eye. One Eye slid down, and Three Eyes climbed up. But Three Eyes was no more skillful and couldn't catch the golden apples no matter how it tried. They always eluded its grasp. Finally, the mother grew impatient and climbed up herself, but like One Eye and Three Eyes, she couldn't seize the fruit and kept grasping at thin air. Then Two Eyes said, "Let me try climbing up. Perhaps I'll succeed." The sisters called out, "You, with your two eyes? What do you think you're doing?" But Two Eyes climbed up, and the golden apples did not retreat from it. Instead, they descended into its hand by themselves, so it could pluck them one by one and brought down a whole apronful. The mother took them from it, and instead of treating poor Two Eyes better for this, along with One Eye and Three Eyes, they only grew jealous that it alone could gather the fruits and treated it even more harshly. When they were standing together by the tree, a young knight happened to pass by. "Quick, Two Eyes," called the two sisters. "Crawl under so we don't have to be ashamed of you," and hastily threw an empty barrel, which stood nearby, over poor Two Eyes, and also shoved the golden apples it had picked under it. As the knight approached, he was a handsome man who stopped, admired the magnificent tree of gold and silver, and said to the two sisters, "To whom does this beautiful tree belong? Whoever gives me a branch of it can ask for whatever they want in return." One Eye and Three Eyes replied that the tree belonged to them, and they would gladly break off a branch for him. They both made a great effort, but they were unable to do it because the branches and fruits always moved away from them. Then the knight said, "It's strange that the tree belongs to you, yet you have no power to break anything from it." They insisted that the tree was theirs. As they spoke, however, a few golden apples rolled out from under the barrel where Two Eyes was hiding, so they rolled to the feet of the knight, because Two Eyes was upset that One Eye and Three Eyes were not telling the truth. When the knight saw the apples, he was amazed and asked where they came from. One Eye and Three Eyes replied that they had another sister who could not show herself because she only had two eyes like other common people. The knight demanded to see her and called out, "Two Eyes, come out." So Two Eyes came out confidently from under the barrel, and the knight was astonished by its great beauty. He said, "You, Two Eyes, can surely break off a branch of the tree for me." "Yes," answered Two Eyes, "I can indeed, because the tree belongs to me." It climbed up and effortlessly broke off a branch with its silver leaves and golden fruits, handing it to the knight. Then the knight said, "Two Eyes, what shall I give you for this?" "Oh," answered Two Eyes, "I suffer hunger and thirst, sorrow and need from early morning till late evening. If you would take me with you and rescue me, I would be happy." So the knight lifted Two Eyes onto his horse and brought it home to his father's castle. There he gave it beautiful clothes, food, and drink to its heart's content, and because he loved it so much, he married it with great joy. As Two Eyes was thus carried away by the handsome knight, the two sisters envied its happiness even more. "The wonderful tree remains with us," they thought, "even if we can't break any fruit from it. Everyone will still stop by, come to us, and praise it. Who knows where our fortune may still bloom?" But the next morning, the tree was gone, and their hope was dashed. And as Two Eyes looked out from its chamber, there to its great joy it stood, having followed it there. Two Eyes lived happily for a long time. Once, two poor women came to the castle and asked for alms. Two Eyes looked into their faces and recognized its sisters, One Eye and Three Eyes, who had fallen into poverty and were wandering, seeking their bread at doorsteps. Two Eyes welcomed them, did good to them, and took care of them, so that the two deeply regretted the harm they had done to their sister in their youth.